For 1.2, I'd call the average about 3 pages, 1.5 sheets of paper. Big reminder, on your homework, include the prompt with your answer. These are your notes. You use this to study. So I'm telling you how to organize your notes. If your paper just says yellow for number 11 in 2 months, you're not going to remember what the question was. If it says canaries are yellow, then you've got something you can study. So do not write an answer as a fragment alone. I don't care how you format your content, but these are notes. So include some lead of the prompt in your answers. Remember that the first couple assignments, the ones you've done, are super basic. Like embarrassment easy. It becomes more difficult over time. So focus on that. You're going to get ones that are, like, don't get used to skimping out. I've seen, like, assignments that the average is about 6 pages of notes and sometimes up from there. Finally, keep your stuff organized in sections, because for each assignment we do vocab study goals, then the next assignment, vocab study goals. So if you got to keep switching back and forth, like yours with all the vocab in one place, I mean, I don't care. It's just a hassle with the paper. It'll slow you down. Any questions about the homework? Okay. I will soon have tryouts, I guess interviews, for the person or persons, usually it's 2, who runs the after-school film series. That person has to attend all the films. We have 2 so that you can split. One person will do the Tuesday and Wednesdays, one person will do the Tuesdays or Thursdays, the other one will do Wednesday nights. And this volunteer gets double credit for the movies and doesn't have to fill out the little paper. That's like a tremendous lump of extra credit. Then again, it requires a lot of organization on your part. Because you've got to look, see what's coming up, make sure we have enough papers. If not, you got to take the originals to the copy office and get duplicates made of the question paper. You've got to handle that list of parent volunteers, schedule them, and you've got to take a post-it that says, Wednesday the 10th of September, the parent will be Jose. Here's his cell phone number in room 65 from 6 until 7:30. So that the office knows what we're doing. It's kind of a lot of running around. But numerically speaking, as long as you do the homework, that's like a big bonus on your grade. This is like one student who basically like skates by. Last year it was on Tara Bird and Caroline Anderson. If you know either of them, you could talk to them about it. Antara needs to train this person tomorrow. So if you're interested, you pretty much got to see me after class, and I will hopefully decide who it is by this time tomorrow, by lunch tomorrow. If you think you're down, the flip side is you got to be available every night. The upside is, since you don't have to answer the questions, you're pretty much going to be in the room and you've been shuffling around all those papers and all that stuff. Sometimes, like on Tara, I use that as like homework night. It's your business. But it's like a firm commitment. Like, this is a job. Oh, and speaking of jobs, never mind. We got to put something up on Facebook for last year, the last year's kids, that my friends are looking for someone to work at a local pizza joint on school evenings. The shift is 4 to 9 p.m. So if interested, at 4 to 9 p.m. shift at local pizza joint, contact Jose. Last year's age group. Okay. Any questions about the after school environmental film series thing? Yes?
What time on Wednesday? Do you have to be here every day?
Usually you show up by 5:30. Like if you're here at 5:45, it's likely to be late. And then you leave right after the movie. Just turn off the lights and close the door. Yeah?
And so if you can't do Tuesdays or Thursdays and you're like Wednesdays is your day, you don't have to go to all three, do you?
No, you'll split this. So the Wednesday person is the primary because they go to everyone no matter what, come hell or high water, they must go.
Okay.
And then for Tuesday, Thursdays, we have like 1 or 2 others that'll fill in for those nights. What else? Anybody else? Okay. See me after class if you want to do this. I'll put you on the list and I'll let you know. Did we talk about how to do the extra credit last week?
Yep.
Did we talk about all the limits?
Yep.
So all this was written by us in period 2 on Friday? Mm-hmm. Sweet. Got that.
Jose, you're going to need to accept me into the group so I can post it.
Oh, here we go. Okay. If there are no other questions, we will start assignment 1.1. And I'd like you to see that this is the way that we run a class. It'll take us about 20 minutes to go through this whole assignment. And maybe then you'll see why I do this class the way I do this class. Sam, you're in there, I think. Okay. The way this works is I skip the stuff that I think the book was fine. I will add stuff where I think it's worth talking about. And if you have questions, you ask me. We go in order from vocab and then study goals. I have to warn you that there's this thing that happens in high school settings sometimes where kids are either bashful, or they're asleep because it's 9 in the morning, or they're asleep because it's right before lunch, or they're asleep because they have a food coma. I understand being bashful, and I understand the food coma thing. But this class, like classes in my university experience, if you don't ask for your education, all you got is what you got, like the book and your paper, and that's it. So seriously, like this is a safe environment to ask questions. If it's a stupid question, I'll be like, no, you're thinking too hard about this. Move on. But seriously, like, don't be bashful. Like, classes that are bashful, like, everybody suffers. Like, your whole grade point average will go down as a class if it's a bashful class. Year in, year out, like, the ones who talk a lot about the stuff always score better. Because everybody listens to what's being said, and this is like a whole community of kids all working on the same paper. So the way I like to think about this is it's like a study group. So we're all going to fix up your notes. Okay? First and foremost, Tragedy of the Commons is like the most mandatory content of the entire school year. Who thinks they can say it without reading it? Okay? Go.
The tragedy of the commons would be that if anyone tries to benefit from the commons, everyone shares the burden. And the only rational thing to do, because of this burden, is to start to benefit from it, which creates more burden. the solutions would be privatization or socialization. Privatization is fencing every area to one person so that the burdens stay with them, while socialization is sharing the benefits with everyone who uses the commons as well as the burdens.
Yeah, that's pretty much okay. Checkmate. Fine, you win. Get up here, smart guy. No, that's golden. One detail I would add is, and I think if you didn't get all that, you better be taking notes. I think that you should be clear that this is only for freely shared or unstructured sharing of a resource. It's not like law and order must inherently break down. It's in a lawless scenario, this is the problem. And second of all, I want to highlight the fact that you said rational or only logical or only reasonable. We don't need to say selfish. This is not greed. This is not hurting anybody. Anyone just being rational, like you said, would take a cut of the benefit if they know they're going to suffer the burden of other people's actions. Anybody want to ask me something? Because he also went on to the solutions and the challenges, and so I'm down if you're down. But this would be one of those times. You know, I read the things that you wrote in Forster's class. Did you guys write something, a review of this in Forster's class, or is that the other period?
Yeah,
We did too.
Oh, did you? Did you do that after the discussion in my class or before?
it was due last Friday, so after.
After?
Some did it before, some did it after.
How many of you wrote that summary of the tragedy of the commons before we talked about it in this class? That's pretty good. And how many of you wrote it afterward? You were wrong. Like, I read those papers, and most of them was not the tragedy. There was stuff in there about population. It's not! I swear. And there was stuff in there about selfishness and greed and evil and, like... So if you have a question, you could ask me now. Yeah?
So it has to be a free common resource?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. By definition, like tragedy
What
of
would be
commons.
like a not free common resource?
Like in our country, in our day and age, basically there are no more free resources that you and I can access.
Yeah.
You know, like, here's one. When you go to the pool, nobody can tell if you're peeing in the pool. Be honest. Do you pee in the pool? Come on. You see, you do, right? Because everybody pees in the pool. Like, that's a free resource. That's truly unstructured. There's no way to know if you're peeing in the pool and like, oh, God. Like, everybody pees in the pool. It feels great. Like, you're not supposed to, and everybody knows, says all over the place, please don't pee in the pool, and everybody's like, yeah, but you can't stop me, you're peeing right now. Right? Like, that's a common resource. Our atmosphere is kind of a freely shared resource. You know, if you got a fart, you're just kind of like, all right, well, I got a fart. Like, everybody knows, you know, you just got to do what you got to do. Same thing. Everything comes down to bodily functions for me, by the way. I will always come back to a bodily function. Okay, question? Kenzie, go on.
What were the problems with the solutions? Like the privatization, you can't privatize everything, like you can
Right.
privatize the ocean, but
And you can't socialize everything. Like, there's no way to share land. Because somebody has to live in a crappy spot. And somebody gets to live in a beautiful spot. Right? Like, we could share Santa Barbara, but you'd be pissed if I got the really cool spot and you got the really crappy spot. So there's no way to share equally land. Right? So you cannot socialize all resources like land. You cannot privatize all resources like atmosphere and ocean. So neither of them works for all resources. Then socially speaking, privatization is sort of like a precursor to like feudal power imbalance. So a lot of people don't like privatizing things. It allows for tyranny, so to speak. Some people are okay with that, but some are not. And you, in socialism, like, not everybody wants to have like a giant government that's in charge of everything. Some people are okay with that, but some are not. So, sociologically speaking, there's always some people who object to either method of management. Does that make sense to you? And if you don't believe me, listen to Politic Radio. It's always people complaining about socialism or complaining about privatization. Anybody else? Okay. Sustainability, you could break it down, something you can keep doing forever. So that's the same for resource harvest, for ecosystems, and for economy, is rules that can keep working forever. Like a sustained note for a singer is like when you hold it. And so a sustainable activity is one that you keep doing, like you can keep doing it for indefinitely, forever. Anybody have a good definition of carrying capacity? And this is the part where you should all be checking your notes, and if you don't have it, now you fix up your notes. That's why you're here. This is like a study group. Yeah?
The maximum amount of organisms an environment can support.
Yeah. And by the way, not at one time, but at that level, so people can call it the maximum sustainable population.
Where the population growth is zero.
What?
Where the population growth is zero.
Yeah, so like you're holding it at that level, like it's going to stay that size. Because technically you could put a gazillion goldfish in the pond for like 15 minutes. But that's not going to be a good population for the pond in the long run. So carrying capacity is like 20, because you can keep 20 there forever. That's good. What's the key cutoff for megacities? 8 million. Make sure you have that written down. So precautionary principle, there's one way that I really like to say this. Playing it safe. You know, being cautious up front, precaution. It's like wearing your helmet every time, just in case. Or not smoking cigarettes because you might get lung cancer, not waiting until you have lung cancer. Yeah?
I think you said like waiting until, like, even if there's not enough scientific evidence.
Yeah, so...
Like, why would you need it? Like, I mean,
Sure.
about, like, global warming, like, maybe there's not enough scientific evidence.
You know, I think there's a bad batch of coffee going around. It gives you diarrhea. It's like mixed in Santa Barbara somewhere. We're testing. We'll find out where it is by next week. Would you be like, yeah, I'll just drink any old coffee? You'd probably be like, bro, I don't want coffee diarrhea. I'm going to kick back and wait until, you know, it's plain and safe, right?
Yeah.
So, like, your former president during a debate was asked, what's your policy priority on climate change? He's like, oh, well, you know, I think it's too soon to tell. The jury's still out. I'm not convinced. So we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. But he could have played it safe and said, well, there might be some truth to this. We should probably kick back on the carbon emissions. Because, you know, science is never certain. Like, a lot of people thought cigarettes were bad for you before the Surgeon General published the report that said cigarettes cause cancer. Like, you just play it safe. Hey, does it make sense, everybody? Want to ask me a question? Because I'm going to skip the study goal about global warming precautionary principles since I just mentioned it now. Yeah?
Yeah, like, what's some other good examples of, like, environmental science, and principles?
So, if we know that it's possible to overfish a fishery, but we don't know how much it takes, it's to set a limit early that's really low, so you don't overdo it before you have the right sustainable harvest. Right?
Like, basically, you don't want to accidentally, like,
That's right, yeah.
mess everything up without
You don't want to accidentally mess everything up without having played it safe when you could have played it safe. Yeah.
Like you eating that happy
Yeah.
chicken.
Yeah, there's your example. Like, who ate all 20 M&Ms? Should have played it safe. In your case, you did know all the rules that were written on the paper. But anyway. And finally, utilitarian, ecological, and aesthetic, moral justifications for conservation. You should know that these are the reasons people give for conserving stuff. These are the, what's it called? Explanations that someone would tell you for why they save the forest, for example. So, utilitarian, somebody give me, save the forest because utilitarian.
We want to make houses out of the trees.
Right, we need to cut down some trees later so we can use it. That make sense to everybody? Utilitarian, to use. Save the forest because ecological. Yes?
Trees produce oxygen, which we need to breathe.
Okay, so this is an interesting example of A, yes, that's ecological because you've attached it to an ecosystem function. Like home for the owls. Like soil generation. But notice, he said, save the trees because ecological function, they provide oxygen. Are we clear with that? And then he added something at the end. Did anybody catch it? Why do we need the oxygen?
Because we need to breathe.
So what does that ultimately come down to?
Utilitarian.
How many of you understand what I just said? Notice, there were two separate arguments in that one sentence. An ecological one, save them because of this ecosystem function, the oxygen production. Agreed? That's the ecosystem justification. Are we cool on that part?
Yep.
And then he added, which is good for us. We use that oxygen. So he gave an ecological and a utilitarian at the end. Many ecological functions are about what we get out of it just through the ecological bridge in the middle. So people say, save the forest, it's good for river quality. That's ecological. And we need clean rivers to support our salmon fisheries. That's utilitarian. Does it make sense? Save the forest for aesthetic. Anybody know? Yes?
The forest looks pretty.
Yes, it looks pretty.
Yeah.
I want to remind you that there are many aesthetics. Aesthetic is an appreciation in general. So you gave a visual, which is our most common, yes.
And these layers, no.
Yeah, exactly, and they smell good. Or like, I like the sound of the wind in the leaves. That's aesthetic. You like sound in that case.
I like to sit in the tree.
I like to smell them. What? I'm talking about trees. And save the forest moral justification.
All the animals have the right to live.
Yeah, that's right. So you use ecological because you're talking about the animals, and then they have some rights. That's the moral part. Say save the trees because they have a right to live, then yeah. And your book uses the rights example, which I think a lot of my students get hung up on. It doesn't have to be a right. You guys know how to define morals? What we believe is right and wrong for any reason. So rights is the reason. You could also say, save the trees because the baby Jesus made them and I protect his creation. Okay, fine. That's not about rights, but it's about a belief system. It's not something you can show me that trees have rights, it says right there, or that the baby Jesus, like, there's your data. You know what I'm saying? It's some belief system. It's like vegetarianism. That's a moral justification. Usually. There are other types of vegetarian. Anybody want to talk more about this one? I'm available to you for only a couple seconds, and then we're moving on from vocab. We've moved on. It took us 12 minutes to go through all the vocab. You can imagine, if somebody didn't have any notes, trying to catch up, including the ones we skipped, would be impossible. That's the way the class works. This is like a study group where you're all fixing up your notes in your own writing with your own words so that it's your private resource to use to study. The test will be on everything. The stuff we talked about and the stuff we didn't talk about. We're just here to fix up your notes. Number 1, about the shrimp and the mangroves. Oh, sorry. Your hand?
On the test, is it just going to be stuff that you put on the study guide, or is it also
Yep.
going to be stuff on the, like, during the chapter? That, like,
It's just what's in the study guide. If it's in the book and it definitely has nothing to do with these, it doesn't show up on the test.
So we don't have to read that? Or...
You got to be careful because a lot of times it's not obvious. The book will be like blah, 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 and that ties back to justifications, and you're like, oh, yeah. So I always tell the kids, read it. But when you know you're in outer space, you end up skimming a little bit, and that's rational and I understand and probably smart as long as you're skimming still. The shrimp farming and the mangroves, to me, that's a classic example of how our decisions, our economy, our eating habits have environmental and social consequences elsewhere on the planet. Like we did with the Annie Leonard story of stuff, that's like the story of shrimp. Like you go to Costco and it's like, yes, I will recycle this bag and I'm not guilty of anything. And it's important to remember, like, where does that come from? What happens to those people? Like, how are their lives? Like, when I go eat shrimp cocktail on Friday night at my house, I'm a little part of the loss of native languages in Greater Indonesia or something. The family of John Eli Miller was not that special. It was just one of the first photos of a pretty average family at the time. He had 338 great-grandchildren at one time, all alive. Yeah?
I read about this guy that had like just like 250 grandchildren.
Oh!
200 something grandchildren.
Well, you can do the math if he survived to see his great-grandchildren.
Yeah, but he had like 6 wives and like.
Damn. Busy man. I gotta take another nap. Okay, so right on for that guy. And yeah, like, do you know that half of humanity carries genes from Genghis Khan? Because of his like amazing footprint of rape? Just a fun fact. So the thing about John Eli Miller, he was just like the first, like it was a really old photo. It was like the oldest dated photo of like an average family size at the time. You know, if everybody has 5 or 6 kids that survive, I think that was his math. So he had 5 or 6 children. So he had about 35 to 40 grandchildren. So he had, I don't know, whatever, maybe 6 or 7 then. 63 grandchildren, there you go. Yeah, so everybody was having on average 7 children. Yeah. Ta-da! Like 7's actually not that gnarly. Like Daniel Barnett, he's already like up to 4, I think. Mr. Dodson, doesn't he have like a 6-pack of babies? How many does he have? 40? Anybody know? Dodson's got a jillion babies. Mr. Todd got 3 at once.
Oh.
Snap. Miss Jordan got 2 at once. Or Jordan. Okay, anyway. Craziness of mathematics. Number 3, remember, we're not saving any planets. The planet's fine. We're trying to save ourselves. Extinction happens. We are in extinction. You don't have to feel bad about that necessarily. So your morals are your business. You can try to save the planet all you want. But environmental science is not so much about the planet. Chinook salmon, I will eat Chinook salmon tonight. So I care a lot about Chinook salmon, and that's a great example, like all of you sucking all the M&Ms out of the bowl. Where like, oh God, this fishing is so easy. I'm going to go fish again tomorrow. And within a generation, it's like, how come there's no more salmon? That's weird. You got to figure out the sustainable harvest so that you can keep doing it, because it would be really nice to keep fishing at historic levels. Are you laughing at me, by the way? Or are you laughing at something else?
Oh yeah, that's what you go doing.
yeah, exactly. Like there were so many people who, in their lifetime, saw that happen. You know, you talk to old timers, and they're like, "Oh man, it was off the hook for like a while," and they're like, "Oh." Okay, number 5 is like a key issue. Hi. Yeah, all 31 juniors are present, and the 1 senior is present.
So we have everyone.
Total of 32. Everyone is present.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, right on. And I'm sorry, children. My wife is calling. I must answer. Hey, beautiful. What's going on? Oh, look at
Talk about rape and how the human extinction is going to happen. Oh, hey, beautiful.
What?
They're on it.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy, actually. Yeah.
Something like
Country.
how did you not like?
Yeah.
There had to have been like diseases and
Yeah.
stuff back then. Like,
I'm just like,
Yeah, I got a couple of those, I suppose. A couple of 1 time. Okay, I gotta go. That was not critical. I'm sorry to waste your time. We were talking about the Chinook salmon that we're eating for dinner, by the way.
sounds pretty critical.
Yeah. My priorities are definitely square, yeah. Okay, so why carrying capacity depends on quality of life? What does that mean? Yes?
The closer you get to the carrying capacity, the less the quality of life goes down.
Yeah, I guess so. You know, we got to figure out, like, not just how much we can share, but how much we want of it. So mathematically, is it possible to share a pizza with 100 people, mathematically?
Yeah.
But who the hell wants to do that? Right? You're like, oh, dang. Toothpick, little pizza toothpick. That's sort of the extreme of the population thing. So in the 1970s, this dude named Ehrlich, Paul Ehrlich, I think was his name. Maybe I'm wrong. He wrote a book called The Population Bomb, and it was talking about human population. He's like, well, you guys, if we look at the math, human population is going up really fast. They did the first, like, global assessment of population, and he was like, whoa! Population size! So he wrote this book, and everybody read it and was like, whoa! Freak out! And everybody was all pissed about India and China. Like, oh, you Indians, stop making Indians! Coincidentally, India has really, really lowered their birth rates. And China at the time was using really draconian methods to lower their birth rates. But anyway, the Western community was freaked out about population. And so somebody wrote a science fiction book about, like, the extreme of population size. And it was set in the distant future when humans were, like, covering the earth in these, like, warehouses. And the entire planet's productive capacity was being used in these giant automated robotic factories to make, like, a nutrient syrup to keep humans alive. But the humans lived these totally miserable lives. They were in the dark. They couldn't speak because that was a waste of calories, and they would starve if they wasted their energy talking. They couldn't move. They weren't wearing clothing. They were just packed in like sardines in a can, literally. Like just snuggled against each other like spooning, with like a straw going in and a straw going out, and the one going out would all get recycled to make more plants grow, to make the syrup that kept the humans alive. And there was like sucking on the straw in the dark in the warehouses. And the book's about like those people saying like, so who runs this system and why are we here? And it's about like wondering why we are alive. And then they realize that something about their body heat or their dreams would be hard. I don't know, the fictional element. And so there was this like issue of class warfare and how there were people living really well on other parts of the planet. And they were just told that everybody was like this, but those were just people whose quality of life had been driven down to the lowest possible level to leave resources for a chosen few who lived in the Garden of Eden effectively. And you understand the metaphor, right, for like first world and third world. That's what I want to remind you. If we are all willing to live like in warehouses with no light and no speech and no motion and no life, we could have a lot of humans on this earth. If we all want to live like you, our planet can hold less than 1 billion. Way less. Okay, quality of life. Number 6, be careful, there are 2 answers. In developed countries, how many people live in urban areas? 75 in developed countries. And globally, including all countries, how many people will live in cities by 2025?
2/3.
2/3, 67%. We just went over the 50-50 mark sometime in my teaching career. Early in my teaching career, half of humanity started to live in cities. I think it's been like 7 or 8 years, but I don't remember. You can probably Google that.
What constitutes, makes it a city?
It's the head count, and I don't know what the number is, but you can probably Google that too. Anybody know?
I think it's
Some number per square mile, I believe. Do you know the most densely packed single square mile of the United States is actually Isla Vista?
I actually did that.
Yeah, the most packed residence. So like if you do the square footage of indoor floor space as an average for the area, its size, so it's actually less than a square mile, it's like 0.8 miles. It's the most densely packed. It's more than like the projects in like Detroit and Philadelphia. No, right?
Crazy.
Yeah.
Because
Good old
college
ID.
kids have no money and property's really expensive, so they have to share a house with 6-7 people.
And share, each other. Number 7 we did, and number 8 I believe we did, unless you want to ask me something. When we did the vocab, we did 7 and 8. I can discuss this further if you ask. If not, okay, welcome to APES. That's how we do it. Now 1.2 vocab. There's only a couple things I want to talk about in the vocab, and then if you have questions, you can ask. And Samuel Ruggieri, I need my green massage bar from the back of my truck.
Okay.
It's like a plastic thing. I have student aids. I love it. Dependent, independent, manipulated, and responding variables. 2 of those are synonymous with 2 of those. You manipulate the independent. The dependent one responds. So, how many times do I have to give Ruggieri a pointless job before he quits being a TA? There's 2 variables. How many pointless jobs and him quitting or not. The The one that I mess with is the manipulated one. How many pointless tasks? Him quitting is what will eventually respond in the experiment. Dependent. His quitting depends on how many pointless tasks I give him. That's the responding one. It depends on what I do. Does that make sense to everybody? Questions? Yes?
Do you do that every period?
Yes.
Give them this job.
Yes. Yes. My poor TAs, they work so hard. Like, seriously, you guys should realize that my TAs are like my sun and stars. They like keep me in business. Like, everything that has to actually be done here is done by TAs. I just like, and I go, and I press print, and then I make notes, and then like, that's my whole job. Okay. Quantitative and qualitative data, I hope you got that. Quantities and qualities. Like a color would be qualitative, but a number would be quantitative. In science, models are not like this. Here's the difference. These kids were like, look, I made a model of a green roof. That is an artistic model, not a scientific model. Anybody know why?
Not functioning.
Right. There's two types of models. The ones that have the look, that's artistic, and the ones that have the function. So this one, a little piece of towel, this functions like a green roof, because green roofs have evaporative cooling, you know? Like your forehead, like the evaporation cools down your brain. Okay, so you can get this thing wet and water will evaporate, and that will cool down this building. Look, it even has like an aluminum tin on top of the house. So the function will be tested. Even if it doesn't look right, in science, we simplify complex systems to understand their function. Simplify complex systems to understand their function. Finally, pseudoscience sounds like science, but it ain't science. Because you can't test it, and there's no data. Yeah?
Example?
This lady came to my door trying to sell me a water filter. She's like, Santa Barbara's water is very basic. That's science. And I'm like, yes, it is. Because you can use litmus paper to test the pH of Santa Barbara water. And it is indeed very high in dissolved calcium. And she's like, that changes the pH of your cells, which affects their ability to generate antioxidants, and thus you get more cancer. And I'm like, that's pseudoscience, because there's no data to suggest that your intake pH affects your internal pH, your bloodstream, that is, because cells regulate pH down to 3 decimal points. And I told her, girlfriend, I'm a scientist. As long as you have enough salt in your life, it doesn't work like that. Get out of here with your pseudoscience. And I told her I wouldn't buy her $700 water filter. Apparently she makes a killing. She owns like 2 houses. Yeah. Anyway, pseudoscience. Vocab questions, anyone? She was talking all this cell stuff and like cancer stuff, and I was like, that sounds pretty good, but I'm a scientist. Anybody else? Vocab? Going once? Yes?
Qualitative data, that's just like anything that's not a number.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay.
If it's not a quantity, it's a quality. Like rough or smooth. If you say how many grains of sand per square inch, then that's a quantity.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay. I hit my head with my massage stick. So Mono Lake, perfect example of the trade-off between human needs and environmental conditions. There was this guy named Mulholland, who, by the way, was a self-made inventor. He taught himself math so he could teach himself physics, so he could teach himself engineering, and he did. He was not classically educated. He went to the library and checked out a bunch of books. Then he was like, you guys, there's a lot of snow, so there's like a lot of water in the Eastern Valley, the East Valley. And so he's like, if we could just pump that water up this hill and bomb it into Los Angeles, we could grow the population size of Los Angeles, because there's like a lot of water. And he like did the math, and he like got out his 10 key and got all nerdy and sharpened his pencils really tight and was like, yo, this will work. Everybody's like, you kook, that's not going to work. And he's like, no. They got cheap land, so we get the water rights. Get the water rights, it's like a gajillion gallons, and if we keep going, that lets us grow the city, and real estate prices go up. And everybody's like, bro, you can't pump. No, dude, shut up. And he's like, no, I got this. And he did, and it worked. And the man like totally changed the ecosystem of the Eastern Sierra, making not enough water go into Mono Lake, causing changes to the ecosystem of Mono Lake, which had repercussions all over California, because bird species, migratory bird species started to shift, and it affected like food production and bug counts and all kinds of stuff. But he wasn't thinking about the ecological part, he was just thinking about the money part, and he did indeed get really rich, and he was an amazing man, very, very intelligent. Anyway, that's Mono Lake. Anybody want to talk more about Mono Lake? I live right near there. That's right next to my entrance to Yosemite National Park. That's where I live in summers. Okay. Anybody have a good definition of science? Not reading it off your paper. Like, read your paper and then see if you can say it in English. Science is
Process, a way of knowing. Or that's how the book defines it.
a way of knowing. Okay. Who else? Yeah?
A never-ending process of discovery.
Yeah, I suppose so. For what purpose? Yeah?
Approximations of like how the world works.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah?
It's like how we explain what happens around us.
Okay. But there's a lot of ways to explain. I can say the baby Jesus made this. That's an explanation. No, that's an explanation. You can laugh, but people believe, so. It's a way to improve and refine our knowledge and our understanding. I think that's the critical issue, that science keeps getting better. Like, you never answer it and move on. Like, science isn't like, okay, that's settled, I'm done here. It's gravity, and I'm out. Like, and then you gotta be like, okay, well then why gravity? And like, how does that apply to other things? And you keep going, science keeps going. It's like to better understand things. You can use a belief system to answer a question. It's not just about answering the question, it's about getting better and better answers. It's about approaching truth. There's a lot of ways to define science. People will tell you different things. There's a grain of truth in all of those, and so I'm not getting cocky about mine, but I like that idea. A process of refining our understanding, of improving our knowledge, approximating truth. Okay. Take out your cell phones now, please. We're going to use them for class, so it's okay. Take out your cell phones. If you are web connected, Google image search crop circles. If you're not web connected, it doesn't matter. If you are web connected, Google image search crop circles. See, I'm a little bit older than you. Like 20 years older than you. And when I was young, this thing with the crop circles happened, and people were like, oh my God, there's no way to explain this. It must be aliens. And all over the world, there was like crazy, like end of the world alien nuttiness. Yes. There was like crazy end of the world aliens are coming to get us psycho. Check this out. Here's what nobody could possibly understand.
To demonstrate that crop circles don't equal an alien invasion, Joe and some friends recently made a circle of their own.
Very simple, just like drawing a simple compass mark on a piece of paper. Once the outline has been made, then it's possible to come in with the famous stalk stomper device, the plank and rub mechanism, which allows then the flattening and swirling of the crops.
Got you smiling the entire time.
You would not believe the global chaos caused by essentially like groups of math students and nerds all over the world that were like, oh wait, we could probably just like tie a rope to a plank and walk it around in the field. It spread. They started to show up all over like South America, the U.S. And people were like, must be aliens. There's no way that if this was done by people, they couldn't like travel all over the world this fast. There was one in Kansas and one in Peru the same night. You know, 2 teams of people. You know, there's this thing about science where we don't jump to conclusions. Like just because you can't explain it doesn't mean that your worst explanation is your best explanation. There's a lot of ways to do this, but I just want to take away like a couple of simple answers. First of all, people misunderstand science. They think that jumping to an answer is science, and it's not. Science is improving the answer until you're closer to knowing.